Dolphins are conscious breathers. They cannot, if they do not purposely decide to take a breath, they will die. They have no automatic breathing system in them at all. And so they don't sleep like we sleep. In fact, they don't sleep. They have a different mechanism, which I guess I'll describe real quickly right now. When we go to sleep at night, first of all, we are either usually on the left side or the right side. It's hardly anybody's got both sides going on at once. We're usually on one side or the other. And of that side, we are maybe 5 or 10% of that side is functioning. 100% of one side and about 90% of the other side is unconscious. It's not functioning. So we're almost an unconscious being. But we're even more than that from a dolphin perspective, because what they do is they come into a circle, like I talked about with the whales when they go to sleep. They all point their noses together, floating on the surface. And they begin to rotate. And I'm not sure which way they rotate, actually. They begin to rotate around. And you said they rotate counterclockwise? Is that what you said?
Most of the time counterclockwise.
Counterclockwise? Okay. And they start rotating counterclockwise. And then at one point, one of them takes a breath and goes in the water. And then followed by the next one, followed by the next one, forming this helical pattern as they're going down into the water. In other words, copying where they would be on the top of the circle as they keep moving down into the water. But as they take this breath and go down in, the dolphins have both sides of their brain on 100%. So even though they've got a brain that's about 350 grams bigger than ours, it's really a lot bigger than ours because they got the whole thing on. We're only functioning. We got a 1,500 gram brain, and that's functioning on about, I don't know, 30 grams or something. It's not very much. And so they start coming down in here. They turn off one side of their brain and leave the other side on. That's called sleep. And so they come down here, and then when they either get to the bottom or when they get back to the top, I don't know from the research that I read, I can't remember anymore. But when they get down at the bottom, where they turn this off, I don't know. They then start coming back up. As the other ones are coming down, they're coming back up, forming a double helical pattern. Coming back up until they match back up in the circle, and when they get up the top, let's say it's up there, they switch sides of the brain. And come down and take it so that the other side can rest. So it allows one side to rest with every other breath. It's a very slow delta, you would say. If you know how delta and theta work. Delta's sleeping state is really, we're just going back and forth, turning off one side of our brain, turning on the other. But it's at a rate about like that. That's what we're doing when we're asleep. And they're just doing it much slower. And so when a dolphin looks at a human being, we're all sleeping because we have one side of our brain turned off. We're not fully turned on beings. Okay, here we go, more school. We ended up with these, we were working with the Fibonacci sequence before. Well, there are two, just as there are two primary shapes, the cube and the sphere, there are two primary mathematical sequences that are primary to life, that move all throughout life. One of them we saw was the Fibonacci. You saw us all in the bone structures and the shape of things and stuff all over the place. But there's another one. There's another one that's just as important. It's just as important as mommy is to daddy. Because the Fibonacci one is female. It's the female cycle. But there's a male one that's also equally important, and it's called the binary sequence. The binary sequence, instead of adding the last number to the last number, it's doubling the last number. So if you had 3, it starts out 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. Just like the mitosis of cell division that we were talking about. That's the binary sequence. But it's really all over the place. And so I want to look at it for a moment. This is it here. And so it goes like this. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, etc. Now at the end of 10, in terms of mitosis or cell division, at the end of 10 divisions you have 512 cells. And that happens to be what the apple is. When we see the apple, that's how many cells are in the apple, from everything that I've learned about it anyway. Now there's 2 facts that we know. One of them is that there are approximately 10 to the 14th cells in the average human body. And I got one too many zeros on here, but it's hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, trillions. There's about 100 trillion cells in the average human body. And if you talk to one doctor, he'll tell you a little more, and if you talk to another one, they'll tell you a little less. But there's a lot of cells in the human body. And another little fact, and there's lots of these facts, but this is another one. Every second of your life, 2.5 million red blood cells die and have to be replaced. Every second. I mean, that's a lot of red blood cells, 2.5 million. It would take you about 3 months just to count to 2.5 million. Day and night. So, I mean, it's a lot. And yet the only way that both of those things can be satisfied, in other words, the way the body can be created and then maintained, is only through mitosis, which is cell division. And so at the end of 10 of these, you've got 512 cells. And you just look at this and you think, well, boy, it better start going fast, because we've got a lot of work to do here. And it just doesn't seem possible at this point. But watch the thing about the binary sequence, and those of you who studied mathematics realize it has a almost magical quality. It has an almost impossible quality about it. At 512 cells, when it goes to the 11th mitosis division, it's at 1,024. And by the end of 10 more, it's at over 500,000. They went from 512 to 500,000, and from 10 to 20. And when it goes for 10 more cell divisions, it goes up to 530 million at the end of 30. And according to Anna C. Pye and Helen Marcus Roberts in their books, Genetics and Its Genetics and Its Concepts and Implications, Freudian slips. It takes exactly and only 46 mitotic cell divisions to create an adult. 46 times. That's a really interesting number, because that's the number of chromosomes we have. And it's also 1/2 the number of stable elements that we have in the environment. And it's just amazing that it could be done in 46 times. It takes 9 months to do it, but in 46 times it creates the whole process. Actually, it must be more than 9 months. I don't know when they figure there's an adult. I haven't read the details on that whole thing yet. The next thing I want to show about this is not having to do with organic structure, but computers. Us humans chose the binary sequence to create our computer structures, and which is kind of wise in a way, because it's one of the living structures, one of the living sequences. And if we had not chosen that one, it would not have been possible, really. And I would like to just very quickly tell you how a computer works, even though most of you know how it works. There's probably somebody here who maybe don't know that. And it's real simple. It's just, you got some light switches in there, called computer chips. You can turn them off or you can turn them on. And say you have, you got a real simple computer, you only have 5 computer chips in it, a few little places in there. And those chips are given names of 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16. So you got 5 of them, and that's their names. That's their numerical value. Well, by turning off or on any sequence of those 5 chips, you can come up with every number between 1 and 16. In other words, if you turn on the first chip, it's called 1, you get 1. If you turn on the second chip, called 2, you get 2. If you turn on both of those chips, you get 3. Okay? If you turn on this one, you get 4. That's the 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 and 1 is 5. 4 and 2 is 6. 4, 2, and 1 is 7. And then you have 8. And 8 and 1 is 9. 8 and 1 is 9. 8 and 2 is 10. 8 and 2 and 1 is 11. 8 and 4 is 12. 8 and 4 and 1 is 13. 8 and 4 and 2 is 14. And 8 and 4 and 2 and 1 is 15. And then you have 16. So you can get every number in between there. If you add one more computer chip and you call it 32, then you can get every number between 1 and 32. If you add one more computer chip and you call it 64, you can get every number between 1 and 64. If you have a computer that has 46 chips in it, you can get every number between 1 and 100 trillion, which is 46 on and offs. I began to see this binary sequence in life over and over and over again. It just keeps repeating it, not just in the mitosis, but it's all over the place in all kinds of ways. And at one point I realized that we had mommy and daddy sequences here. And so I suspected, since there is always a geometrical nature behind numbers, I'll just throw something out here, by the way. Most scientists believe that numbers, or mathematics, is the hidden language behind their science. I don't agree with that. I say that geometry is the hidden shape underneath all numbers that generates the numbers that is behind the science. And so for me, when I see all these numbers, I realize there's got to be a shape underneath it that has generated the two sequences. And or maybe one shape that generated one shape that generated the other. But because they appeared to be mommy and daddy to me, I highly intuited that there must be some kind of geometrical form or shape or pattern that tied the two together. And I looked for years on it and thought about it for years and years and years and never could find it. And then one day I was going through one of my son's 6th grade mathematical books, and I was just looking at it and checking up on things and seeing how stuff works. And as I was going through there, I came across something. And I really am sorry, whoever wrote this book, I don't remember their name. I would like to give them credit. But I don't know. I don't even have the book anymore. But he did something in there that he actually didn't know what he did. He did something really incredible and was unconscious that he had done it. But the guy had taken a particular geometrical form and plotted a logarithmic spiral on it. And when he did, he simultaneously came up with both the two sequences, the Fibonacci and the binary sequence. And he didn't even know he had done that. He was talking about something totally different. But this is what happened. This was the geometrical form that he was working with. It's called a polar graph, which is a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional form, a sphere. It's how to plot from a sphere onto a two-dimensional form. It makes perfect sense now that I think about what it is. It's one of the sacred shapes going from three to two-dimensional levels. And the other thing is about this, I always thought this was, when I started thinking about this, I thought this was something that maybe the Navy came up with, or Army, or something that was relatively new. And I'm beginning to find out that the polar graph goes all the way back as far as Egypt. That they had maps of the Earth going all the way back using a system similar to this. And so this is old, it's ancient. So this is how we usually see a polar graph, which is there will be a circle in the middle, and whatever the radii of that circle is, they'll come out, that disc, that will become your yardstick, and you call that 1. And then you just come out that far to the next circle, and you keep coming out that distance to create all your circles. And then there are 36 lines equally spaced, which create your 360 degrees. Of course, even everything in here is not arbitrary. 360 degrees isn't arbitrary. When you know the geometries, there's all reasons why it's all in there, the more you get into this. But anyway, this was the shape, and what this man did was, he took this middle sphere in here, he plotted a logarithmic spiral. As it turns out, the logarithmic spiral is the creator or the key between both of those other two the Fibonacci and the binary sequence. And so he plotted one around here. He started at 0 degrees, and he plotted this spiral around until it came around one time back to 0 degrees, like this. He started here, and he plotted this spiral, logarithmic spiral, around one time. Now, he was only concerned where the spiral crossed the degree marks. And the system that he used to calculate this was using the central circle as your measuring stick of 1, and say you wanted to know where this point was, he would come here and he'd go, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4.5 approximately radii. You see how that is? This one over here would be 1, 2.8 radii approximately. But you could calculate this pretty accurately. Well, look at the mathematics. This is from 0 to 360 degrees. At 0 degrees, it is exactly 1, because it's starting right on the surface of the planet. And at 120 degrees, it keeps going up and up and up and up, but at 120 degrees, it exactly crosses it at 2. And then over here, at 240 degrees, it just perfectly goes over at 4. And then, at 360 degrees, it returns exactly at 8. That's 1, 2, 4, 8. Binary sequence. At the same moment, it goes 1, 2, and also at 190 degrees, it crosses exactly at 3. And 280 degrees, exactly at 5. 360 degrees, exactly at 8. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Fibonacci sequence. Both unfolding from this particular pattern. And I went, wow! And I have to admit a defect in my personality here right now. I tend to, when I see things like this, I will check one thing out, and then I just know that it's true for the rest of it, so I go on. And I've never finished this work. I've only looked at the binary sequence of 1, 2, 4, 8, and I've never checked out what it means in terms of the geometries behind the Fibonacci sequence. I'm not real interested, but it could be very important to somebody's work here. I don't know, if you want to do that, you can go ahead and do it. So I'm going to look only at the binary sequence right now. But here's what that means geometrically. Those points of 0, 120, 240, and 0 form an equilateral triangle around the center. Geometrically, this is binary sequence. It's more than just an equilateral triangle, because you are now literally looking at a tetrahedron, because the lines are all there. There's a line coming to the center, and you are looking at a two-dimensional view of a tetrahedron. So realize that as we start to work here. Inscribed perfectly in a sphere. However, I'm going to change this a little bit. There's another image in here, and that image is an equilateral triangle with a line down the middle. See this line here? That's another image that's in there. Well, there was another man. His name was Keith Kirchlow, and who's done a lot of real incredible work. You can check out his work too. It's very mental, but it's very good. And Keith just happened, and I don't know how he ever figured it out. It was just pure luck. He happened to find out, stumble upon, I think would be the best word, that if you had an equilateral triangle with a line down the middle, that an incredible, unique phenomena took place. He did not realize it was really a tetrahedron. He found out that if you took the line that was in the middle and you measured, you had to use it, this is the flaw in his system, you had to measure with a measuring stick. As soon as you're ever using, anytime you have to use a ruler, then you're not at the core. Go deeper. Because you should never have to measure anything. You should be able to figure it all out with nothing but a compass and just a straight edge. And all your measuring should be automatically determined by the lines, which I'll show you what I mean in just a moment. But anyway, he had to measure from here to find the middle. Once he found the middle, you draw a line straight up at 90 degrees and then bring it down to this corner. Where it crosses, you make another one straight up and down to this corner. And you could keep doing that, obviously. And he discovers something, that this line, this middle line, the lengths of these lines that are broken up inside of there do something rather remarkable. This is his writing. It says, continuing in this way, meaning this little pattern that he made, each successive proportion will be the harmonic mean between the previous proportion and the total length. Same kind of thing that we were doing with A over B, and, for the phi ratio. And all of these proportions will be musically significant. 1/2 being the octave, meaning the length of this to the length of this is equivalent proportionately to the octave. 2/3 being the fifth, 4/5 being the major third, 8/9 being the major tone, and 16/17 being the half tone. It's perfect musical proportions. So he tried it another way, and he came down here and tried another pattern. And the same thing came out. He came out with 1/7, 1/4, 2/5, 4/7, 8/11, and 16/19, and all those were musical proportions. But there are musical notes associated with those proportions. And he sort of went wow, and I went really wow, because I was seeing the other side of the whole thing was going on there. So look at this. Here's the original one. To find the middle, you don't have to measure. Just draw a line from there to the center. It will come up, come down, and precisely break this in half to the middle. So the middle point is the octave. And so then I can automatically create the rest of the pattern that he created, but without any measuring stick. And in fact, even the external sphere is aligned with what happens in the middle, what happens off of here. We have done a lot of research, and what we believe now is that you can draw a line from any one of these three corners to any space inside of here. Say you pick that one right there. You draw a line up to that one and then down. And make you mess with your patterns. You'll come up with all the musical proportions there are, period and to end. All the harmonics of music that exist. No matter what scales or types of scales you want to use, they will all be there. And we should be able to prove this soon, which will mean that the harmonics of music are these proportions that are located in the simplest shape in existence, a tetrahedron. Even remember we have the 8 notes and 5 notes creating the chromatic scale, which have 12 divisions in it. And the divisions along each one of these sides is 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 12 spaces on each one of these sides. while I was studying this and understanding how sound was a function of a tetrahedron, someone sent me a postcard. It was Janice Dolphin. She's a good person. She sent me a postcard, and which happened to be a polar graph with reflective surfaces on it. How light reflects off of a polar graph. And I mean, it was right while I was in the midst of this, so I was sitting there going, wow, wow, wow. Oh, thanks for the postcard. Wow, wow, wow. I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was perfect timing. So this is a polar graph, and this is how light reflects off of a polar graph. With logarithmic spirals. And you can see it happening. And I was just like overwhelmed. I mean, for me it was very powerful. And you can actually see that the white light is exactly 180, and right at 90 degrees you can see the blackening, the black light spirals that come out of it. And we have seen that somewhere else before. You can just look at it. We have the same energy fields around us, of course. You're just looking at it on a major level. As above, so below. Everything is the same. Now there's another point I want to make right now before I go on. Coming back to this one. You remember before when I said that when you're looking at these geometries, that the lines that are on here are not just lines on a page, but they're spirit moving through nothing. And that they're maps. Well, there's another statement I'd like to make about it, and that is that, though I made it once before, but I want to kind of make it come home quicker or harder. And that is that for every line that's on a page, it has an experiential aspect to it. It's not just arbitrary. It's not just a move. Every time spirit moves, there is a corresponding relationship into the outer world that is associated with it. In every single case. There's no exceptions. In this case, we're talking about harmonics of music. And so, you could be looking at that, or you could be thinking about this, which is, or what this represents, are musical notes, and they are really interrelated. There's really no difference. This strikes you primarily into your left brain. This comes into your right brain. If you add right now and you go 1 plus 1 is 2 and 2 plus 2 is 4, you're functioning from your left brain. If you hum and you go, you just switched over to your right brain. As long as you don't put any words or anything into it. If you listen to music without words, it goes to your right brain. And so, what I'd like to do, just for a moment, just for 1 minute or so, is I'm just going to play some music. Hopefully it's tuned. I'm just going to play this flute. It's a little Sioux Indian flute, Lakota Indian flute. And I'll play just a little bit of Indian music. And while I am, you might realize that the sounds you are hearing and the musical significance of the notes that you're hearing is exactly the same thing up there, only there it's in geometry rather than in what's coming into your right brain through experience. So let's try this for a moment. Same thing. Just feels different. Just feels different, that's all. But one's the same as the other one. It's a lot easier to take this one in, I imagine, but that's really the same thing. And if you get this, then you understand what sacred geometry is about. Same way with all the sine wave signatures that are coming up on computers and everything. They have direct relationships into human life, which we're discovering. She's discovering how they relate to different minerals and everything in the body. It all has meaning. So if you plot two spirals, like nature shows, 180 degrees off, what you get is two equilateral triangles, which of course are really two tetrahedrons, which is a star tetrahedron inscribed perfectly in a sphere. Precisely, mathematically, has been a star tetrahedron inscribed in a sphere, which is the key to the Merkaba, to interdimensional time-space, and the harmonics. There is a star that will fit perfectly inside of that one, and there is a sphere that will fit perfectly inside of the original hexagon. And if you were to take that one that fits inside of there and place it on each one of these points all the way around there, what you would have is the fruit of life. And so, remember, that's what one of the sacred forms. We first showed one of the how by connecting all the centers together, we came up with the sacred shapes that were the basis of structure in the reality. But by not connecting the centers together like we did here, but rather by concentric circles that are formed off of the patterns, and by radial lines that come out from the center, forming the polar graph, we came up with all this information that we had just looked at. The relationship of sound and light and shape and things that were formed through this, the harmonics of music and sound, were all. So I could have done it the other way around. I could reverse all the slides and say, okay, we're starting with here and now we're going to go the other way. That isn't how I got it, so that's how I gave it to you. And so what you've just seen is another one of the informational systems, another way of superimposing male energy over the female energy, radial lines coming out. And of course, I've just scratched the surface just a little tiny bit. I mean, we did not go into depth of what it means, what the harmonics of sound means relative to one of these things. We haven't, or light or anything else. We haven't deeply gone into it. We've just shown the relationship. And there probably are, I believe, 10 other sequences that are associated with this. This is my belief. 10 and possibly 11 that are associated with it, and I haven't even looked into those areas either, because I'm just looking for I'm just skimming along the surface here is all we're doing. When you go into the forest, you'll see that if there's a vortex coming out of the earth that is rotating clockwise, it'll kill everything in it. You go in, just walk through the forest and be observant and watch. And you'll see these spots anywhere. They could be anywhere from the size of maybe this big to usually not much bigger than this room, though there are some. There's one in California called the Mystery Spot. Anybody seen that one? That's a big one. That one's about 2 city blocks around. If you've never been there, I highly recommend you go there. Highly, 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 highly recommend you go there. It's incredible. It's near San Jose, California. Santa Cruz. It's right outside of Santa Cruz, California. Anyway, going through the forest, you'll see them rotating this way, and they'll kill everything. If you see them going the other way, you'll still see the distortion in things, but they'll be real alive. They'll be super alive. But if the field vortex goes clockwise, everything in it, all the plant life, everything else like that, will just be bare and it'll be dead. There won't be anything in there. There won't even be bugs in there, nothing. Everything gets out of that place. The one in Santa Cruz is rotating clockwise, counterclockwise, and it's slightly tilted at an angle. It's coming out of the earth, not at it. So it's like this. And you can really study these things. They're so clear and sharp, they're like a piece of glass. It's like a glass wall. And you go there and they have a board. They say, okay, here's the vortex, starts right there. And they're not kidding. They have this flat board that's on there, and they got a level on there, so you can see that the board is absolutely flat. And they'll gladly let you bring your own level and put on there to check that board is flat. It's a little platform. And the line right through the middle of it where the vortex ends, on one side you're in the vortex and the other side you're not. And you can get two people the same height, and you get on this and the other person gets on the other side, and you look at each other. And the one in the vortex, I can't remember which way it is, but I'll just say, I think it's the one in the vortex. Which way is it? I think the one in the vortex, you look at the person, and they appear to be somewhere between 4 and 6 inches taller. I mean, you go like that. And then you switch around, you turn around, and all of a sudden, you're looking down at this guy. And it's incredible, and you can do it all you want. You check this level thing, you get back on here, and you're only just like a foot apart. And yet, you really do appear to be a lot smaller. You appear to be bigger and looking down at the other person. And when you go in there, you can see all these trees just twisted around, growing in these big spirals and everything in there. And they got rooms in there where they got, you roll a ball and it goes uphill. There's all this weird stuff inside these things because it's a distortion of the magnetic fields and everything that's going on. It's a pretty interesting place. Yeah.
What is,
in terms of spinning the energy fields, clockwise and counterclockwise, what is the relationship to what you just said in the forest?
Well, if you spin the energy fields clockwise, if you spin them counterclockwise, now let's put it this way, it isn't which way you're spinning, it's you got two fields, you got one going this way and one going this way. What life has found is the one that's going that way has to be spinning faster than the one that's spinning this way. And it needs to be spinning Fibonacci ratio faster. So you can have them equal speed. That is one that you can do is equal speed, and that won't do anything. But if you have the one, usually what life does is if this one's going 21, then this one's going to be going 34. This one's going 3, then this one's going to have to go 5. And if you do that, then that's a ratio that life has found works, and life thrives in that situation. It just thrives in it. And if you do that, you get those kind of fields growing around where there's plants and things like that, they just go crazy, they love it. But if you reverse it, going around the other, if you increase the speed of this one, see the difference is, just so you get this clear, say this one's going 21 this way, and this one's going 34 that way. The difference is 13. So even though you got two fields going like this, the difference is 13, and so you have this overall slow rotational field of the entire structure going counterclockwise.
Does that mean that you shouldn't spin a single field clockwise?
If you did, and if you spun a single field clockwise for very long, you would start getting very sick and you would die. I'll just quickly tell you what happened to the first time. I talked about this to somebody here, but I don't think I talked about this to the group, just to you, right? There's an advanced workshop on this, which I'm not allowed to give right now. Maybe I'll be able to. I gave it 3 times, and maybe I'll be able to give it in the future. It's how to join groups together in a Merkaba. And I had a group in Colorado, and about 20 people, and we were sitting there, and it was the very first time I'd ever done it, and so I was learning. And it's very complex patterns. You're not using just this one here. You're using a series of other geometrical patterns that are out around the body. And you're spinning some of them one way and some of them the other way and some one way. And the overall speeds is what creates the pattern. And they have to be phase locked and all this stuff you have to do with them to get this pattern going. And so I got you start by creating the original Merkaba that we learned here. So we all did that. We created that one, then we created one for the group, which was down there. And then I had to switch to a different geometrical shape, which was to go this way. And I did that, and I got it going this way. So I had the overall effect of the Merkaba, of the group, rotating clockwise. And they told me when I did this that you have to do that, but do it real quickly and get into the next one, so that even though you go counterclockwise for a moment, you just stay there for a moment and immediately switch to the other one. Well, when I created the one going this way, for a moment, I forgot how to do it. I couldn't remember the exact speed of, and exactly, it's a little complicated. I couldn't remember exactly how to do it, so I was sitting there going, let's see. And in that little let's see, we were sitting in a clear blue sky where everything was absolutely calm outside, and the wind took up, and it started going a counterclockwise wind. And it started going faster, and in about 30 seconds, which took me to do that, it went from totally calm to the trees were bent over like this, ready to break off, and garbage cans were flying through the air and everything else like that. And everybody in the rooms, their eyes were about this big. With my eyes about that big. And I was like, let's see how to do this. And I finally go, okay, I got it, understood. And we told them what to do, and we all went, and we got this thing going this way, and instantly all the trees went, just like that. And I really learned an incredible lesson. And one of the scientists that I was with saw that, and he goes, wow. And so he went back to his lab and set up electronically, using holographic sound, the fields that we had created, and got to that stage where we had done it at, and just left it going to see what would happen. And on an absolute clear day in Colorado, with no clouds or anything, within a few minutes, a black funnel that you couldn't even see through formed about a mile above it and came right down to the thing. You can stand outside and see this huge thing coming right down to the thing. I mean, we obviously turned this baby off, but life cannot live. It is the destructive force. It's the force that destroys us. And so.
Is that like the time?
Oh, she says, so a clock goes clockwise, so it's like dying. That's really good. I don't know. It's much more complex than that, though, because you see, when a physical object is rotating clockwise, the energy lines are going counterclockwise. And so when you start really thinking about all this stuff, it's like rubbing your hand and patting your belly. It's more complex. Yeah.
I'm sorry, weren't the Native Americans trying to do that in the ghost dance so they would disappear from the lights?
Could be. I don't know. I don't know what that's about.
Because they were supposed to be impervious to the bullets, and they were going to join all those who had already gone on, and they were supposed to pass into another dimension.
Well, this is. There's a lot to that, and I do know from direct experience that that's real. But I don't know what they were doing because I wasn't there, or what they were attempting to do. But in that same group that we were working with, what I was just talking about, we had taken a tape. I told her about this too. We had taken a cassette tape, and programmed the speed ratios in holographic sound, which would take us to the threshold of this experience, and then take us right to the edge where we could begin to experience the interface. That's what this tape had done. We had programmed. We knew what was on the tape, and so that was to make sure that we didn't go any further or anything else like that. And we put the tape in, and we all did this experience. That mistake thing I did was one of the practice runs, but at one point we had all got ready and we knew what we were doing. We put this tape in, and we were going to take us up to the threshold where we could look around a little bit and see what some of this stuff was. And only God had a different idea, and I still don't know what the whole thing was about. I mean, it started going up through the cycles, and it gets very, very high cycles, and it's going, the spinning ratios is going, wah, 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 and it got up to this one where we were supposed to stop. The tape kept going. I kept going higher and higher and higher and higher. And I looked over at this other guy, and he looked at me, and we were all going, holy cow, what's going on? It's not even on the tape, you know? And finally we realized we were being taken somewhere. We didn't have any choice. It was just taking us somewhere. And so we all just held on. And I was just wondering where we were going, you know? And pretty soon we popped out into this kind of a white, foggy place. And there were all these Anasazi Indians there. Lots of them. And they came right up to our group, and they said, and the group all could talk about this later, right? They said, who are you? We said, who are you? And we were right near Mesa Verde when we were doing this, which is where the Anasazis were. And I didn't know who they were, and they said that they were the Anasazi, and they said, they looked at us and they said that we were the first white man that had ever been in this place. And at first they were real protective and they were asking us a bunch of things. And there's something I can't tell you having to do with a crystal he was holding in his hand, but I knew what the crystal was. And when I looked at the crystal and I saw it and I knew what it was, I told him what the crystal was. And when I told him what the crystal was, he just this was the leader, completely relaxed and said, oh, okay, well in that case. And became really friendly, gave us a name, gave us a tribal name, and told us if we ever wanted to come back, fine, come on back. But the Anasazis are alive, and they've found another parallel world on the earth to exist in. And they're doing just fine there, all pretty much alone by themselves. And so what you're saying in terms of what they were attempting to do was something that their brothers had already done, so they knew that this was possible.
I wanted to ask about the Indians because you were talking about that experience. Now, from what you're saying is they're existing on probably an overtone higher than the third dimension, not quite the fourth, but they're existing in a world that is on one of the overtones?
Yeah. It's usually, what the Indians have found is a certain area that is generally held for things like tree spirits and things that we call like elves and real simple spirits. They've found how to live peacefully in those areas. They're the kind of the about the fourth, fifth, and sixth overtone of the fourth dimension is where they are. They're in the fourth dimension, yeah. They're underneath the angelic realms, underneath the Christ consciousness realms. And once you're in one of those worlds, it's just as vast as this one. And then come back. Okay, one more question.
As you probably know, the Native American people, in their ceremony, in their sun dance, everything is clockwise, except
they move clockwise, that's right, but that's a physical rotation. Let me ask you one thing. Are they physically? You're physically moving. You're rotating like this. Okay, that's different. That's okay.
The centers are teaching to spin the field clockwise.
Well, if you're spinning the field clockwise, that will do you in. If you're physically rotating clockwise, or like the American Indians move around the sweat lodges, physically move. See, look at this. If you've got a hose of water, right, and you want to create a field that moves counterclockwise, which way do you have to rotate? You have to physically move clockwise to create a field that rotates counterclockwise. So I didn't understand what you were saying. So what she's teaching is okay. If you, in what we're talking here is the body, the physical aspect is staying still, and we're creating the field that rotates counterclockwise. So that's what I was trying to say. It's tricky to understand. Yeah. I thought you meant they were creating fields that went clockwise.
Yeah. At every octave, isn't there a change of the spin?
You mean past the Great Wall?
No, like on the physical level is okay. When you change to the next
Well, that may be true.
Like when you're coming from the heart,
my
it would be going
instructions-
differently.
My instructions are only for here, and how to get from here to the other one. When you go up to different levels, there may be reversals in spins and things. I don't have that information, so I can't help you on that. Now, all these questions you guys have, I mean, I'm here to teach one subject, but all of this information can be taken out into any subject whatsoever. No matter what it is that you were interested in, no matter what you want to do, you can take what you're learning here in sacred geometry and apply to it, and all knowledge available is open. All possibilities can be open to you in terms of everything that you could ever want to know about any subject whatsoever, both positive and negative sides of it. And so all you got to do is just start applying it into your lives and take it out. Once you start working with it, you see how easy it is. And we talked about love having shape, though we haven't got to it yet. And we talked about how shape affects everything. Well, there is shape associated with awareness. How the lenses that you interpret the reality with have shape to them. There's shape connected to it. It seems kind of like a strange subject. It seems kind of strange, like love would have a shape too, but so does awareness. And since that's what we're really talking about here, is going from one level to another, is changing awareness, changing consciousness levels, we need to kind of look at these things for a moment. According to Thoth, if you were to, he said, all you'd have to do is just get a few of them and hold them still and measure them. Don't move. And see the shape of the field that would fit around them relative to a sphere. And whether or not the perimeter of for humans, for example, the perimeter of the square that fits around you is bigger or littler than the circle that fits around you, and how much bigger or little will determine exactly, mathematically, how they're interpreting the reality. There's other ways. You could look at the grid around the planet and know instantly anyway, but you could also tell by their physical shape and form. And then there's this other thing he said, that there's a legend that says that there are 9 concentric crystal balls underneath the Sphinx. There's these, if you can imagine this one crystal ball inside of another crystal ball inside of another one, there's 9 of them. And this is supposedly a physical object sitting somewhere underneath the Sphinx, and that it was the key to consciousness on Earth. And there are people searching for this real hard, have been for many years, trying to find this crystal ball and thinking that that's going to be the key, because once they get to the ball, then they got to figure out what it is, which might take longer. Thoth says that it's really there, but that it isn't necessary to have the ball. All you got to do is draw 9 concentric circles on a page, and that's good enough. And so here are these 9 concentric circles, starting from this little one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, out to the green one out there. And that if you want to understand the consciousness, he says, look at the relationship of the squares to the circles. Again, this is male energy in relationship to female energy. Look at the squares and relationships, and look how squares that are around the circles interact with the circles. And look to see if there are any places where the phi ratio takes place, where the golden mean ratio happens, that, where the circle and the square are the same perimeter, or if it's very close. You're not going to get a perfection starting out, but where it hits really, really closely. Well, you look at the first one, the first square around the first circle, and it doesn't even touch another circle. It doesn't interact with another circle. The square around the second one still doesn't touch. The square around the third one starts to penetrate the fourth one, but that's obviously not there. But the square that goes around the fourth circle relative to the fifth circle happens to be an almost perfect phi ratio. That is the place that self-aware consciousness happens for the first time. That's 42 plus 2 chromosomes. That's the aberrational. it doesn't go into phi ratio again until you get to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, this purple one. Seventh circle relative to, not one above like the fourth and the fifth, but the seventh circle relative to the ninth one. So you see how it passes through the green one here? We're just visually looking at this right now. That is the seventh relative to the ninth, also forms a near perfect phi ratio. So there are two places in there where you have a near perfect one. However, according to Thoth, life has never figured out how to go from the fourth level to the seventh level without passing through this disharmonic level between them. So there's another stage in there. I realize I'm not pinning anything down here yet. I will. So this fourth level here, relative to the fifth, there's two stages in between this fourth circle and the fifth circle and the seventh circle. Getting mixed up myself here. 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth square and the seventh square, there are two other possible squares that are in between. As it turns out, and I never understood why for a long time, but it was the fifth circle relative to the sixth one that life has chosen. He didn't tell me for a long time. He said, you figure it out. Well, it took me like 2 years or something to figure it out. And I finally did figure it out. And what it is that if you take this square and of the seventh and turn it into a diamond, it will so happen that this one will come up and touch perfectly. If you drew these perfectly, this is just touching that circle. You see how this square comes down? And if you do, it comes up and it will touch perfectly, and that particular consciousness shows or can determine where the boundaries of the next one are. And so, in terms of human terms, we have something within us that is the key to Christ consciousness. We are not Christ consciousness, but we contain something within us that can reach it. So it's just geometrically showing what it is. If you want to see what I'm talking about in terms of the ratios, this green one is the first level, the red one is the second level, and the blue one is the third level of consciousness. And you can actually measure which one is bigger than the other without any sticks or anything. That's usual. You should be able to. Using your radii as your measuring stick and counting that measuring stick as 1, gets more. You could count it as anything, but if you count it as 1.6, it becomes complicated. So you count it as 1. So your radii is your measuring stick. Then you could tell how many radii are across one edge of the square because it is the same as the diameter of this fourth circle. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 radii across that fourth circle. Same number of radii across that edge. And so there's, since there's 4 edges, there's going to be 4 times 8, or 32 radii perfectly around that green square. And the fifth circle out here, if you want to know how many radii are around that, you just count across, and you'll see that there are 10 radii across the fifth circle, and you just go 10 times pi. And 10 times pi is 31.40. So there's 31.40 radii around that circle. So they're very close. One is 31.4 and the other one is 32. They're very, very close in that. And then they go way out until you get to the seventh one. And the seventh one has 14 radii across it, and 4 times 14 is 56. There's 56 radii around the blue square. And if you come out to the final circle, there's 18 radii across it, and 18 times pi is 56.52. So the first one has the circle a little bit smaller. The second one has the circle a little bit bigger. And if you keep running these circles out for a long ways, you'll see this little bigger, little smaller, little bigger, little smaller, little bigger, and how over time we keep getting closer and closer to this perfection of this perfect square and perfect circle as consciousness progresses. The one that we are in is this red one, which is the stepping stone between the two, and we're not even close. But it'll show that if you measure them, I think we're about 3 radii off or something. Our consciousness we're not even close to being harmonic. But a necessary place to go. What is it about this? Why does this happen at the 4th circle relative to the 5th? There is an actual reason why consciousness becomes self-aware at that stage. There's a hidden pattern behind this. And the hidden pattern is very familiar. It's the fruit of life. If you take the fruit of life and you count this as your radii as 1, you make a circle which is there, and you come out one more and put a circle which will come around there, and then one more, and in other words, you make your concentric circles out from that, starting with the radii of this. Here's what happens. This becomes the 1, 2, 3, the 4th circle. There's your square. And the 5th circle is the one that exactly contains. Look how the fruit of life fits into that pattern like a key. Perfectly. Absolutely flawlessly. And that is the reason that self-aware happens at that point. It's the reason behind it. It's the secret. This is in all your sacred geometry. When you get to something and you want to know why, look further. Look further. See what the sacred forms are that are hidden behind that, and then you'll begin to understand why. And so this is the first time right here. Okay, I get to talk about Lucy Lubitz. She's a great woman. Though she's dead now, I'm really sorry. I really wanted to meet her, but she died a few years ago. She lived in Abydos, Egypt. But when I was studying all this, I started studying the Egyptian thoughts on it. I'm getting this from Thoth. He tells me things, and whenever he tells me things, I start checking him out always. He told me to. He says, don't believe me. Go find out for yourself. It's the same thing I tell you. And so I started checking. He said that there were these 5 levels, and that we were within 3. And so I started checking this in Egyptian beliefs and thoughts, and found out that they did believe that there were 5 levels, and that we were functioning through 3. And Lucy de Lubitz happened to be one of the people who was Swallow de Lubitz's daughter, one of the people who had really studied this in depth. This whole concept of these 3 different levels of consciousness that we were involved in. And she took everything she knew and put it into this one drawing. It was the summation of everything she knew about this. And so I had to redraw the drawing because it wasn't real clear. I redrew the drawing down here like this and got all the lines clear and straight. And the first thing that appears that you can see is you've got a Star of David with a Star of David in it and a circle in the center. Well, that's the minimum amount of information to give the fruit of life. So, I mean, immediately you see that. And here you see this ladder running up the middle, which goes from 0 to 19, and then it goes to 20 and 21 up here. And she talks about how there are 3 different sizes of skulls associated with 3 different levels. And this is talking about these 3 different skull sizes. She says the first one is at 18. And according to the Egyptian belief, we grew this entire top of our head when writing was introduced to deal with the complexity of writing. That this was added on later. And then later, when we go to the next level, we will grow a much bigger skull, like our Akhenaten type skull, to deal with the complexity of fourth dimensional consciousness. This is that, remember I said there was a big pile of rocks, it was at Karnak? That was a big pile of rocks, and she just picked up one of them, maybe 2 or 3 of them, measured them, looked at it, and said, aha, and said, made a drawing, says, that's what it looks like. And told them how to, and they put all the rocks together and then formed it. Then she went over to another big pile of rocks, I don't have the other one here, picked up some of those and measured those and said, okay, this is what it'll look like. And they put it all together and it formed this other temple, which was different than this one. And she could tell, just on the geometry, I mean, this is how well she understood what sacred geometry was all about. Because these temples were all holographic in their nature, so she knew that once she knew what a little piece was, she could figure out what everything was going to be like. And she was an amazing, amazing person. And this is the Luxor temple, an aerial view, a drawing of it from the Luxor. And this temple is based on 19. Remember that ladder went up, and at 19 it showed our skull size? And this was the temple of man, which is us. And you see the skeleton behind here. You enter in, this is a big, huge, enormous, incredible 3 or 4 block long temple. It's big. And inside of here are all the proportions of the human body and all these other kinds of things. Carefully worked out. It's very, very carefully. And it's broken up into these 19 divisions. Well, I've never been able to correlate the straight Egyptian 18, 19, and 21 divisions that they have given 3 levels of consciousness with, and the one that Thoth has given me, which is this one of these other views. I can't, at this point, cannot find the bridge between the two. There's going to be some sacred geometry form hidden behind there that's there, but I can't find it, that would bridge those two things. So far I can't do that. So I have to skip between one or other, whether I'm talking about Egyptian system or the one that Thoth has given me. And this is the one where I told that story, which I'm not going to tell this time, about going into the Temple of Dreams. I remember, for those of you that saw the thing. I know I haven't told any stories yet, because I'm just barely being able to get the information through here. I will tell a couple here, but it's I don't know. I'm gonna have to go to 6 days. Yeah.
Why not?
That's why he did it in 6 days. He needed it. I can barely rest doing it in 5. I'll tell you, it's really hard. It's really hard. Like, for a long time I was doing it in 4, and I mean, we were just like, I had to drop out tons of stuff and really move out to be able to make it. Well, anyway, this temple has a long causeway that goes for several miles over to, this is Luxor, and it goes over to Karnak. There's this wide thing about as wide as this room, lined with sphinxes, with sphinx heads on it. And then the sphinx heads turn into ram's heads as it gets into the Temple of Dreams. And so the Temple of Man are connected to the Temple of Dreams. They have you come in here for, this is where your initiation begins. This is where Thoth had me begin. I had to start in that temple. He said if I started in any other temple, forget it and go home. And I had to start here for the first initiation here, and then go to the Temple of Dreams, and then from there were certain places I had to go to, all of it. So when we talk about that. And the Temple of Dreams is very powerful if you ever have that initiation, because your dreams become real, and it becomes a school. And for a long time I was taught through my dreams. I mean, there was no rest, right? I'd go in, I'd lay down, and here I'd be with all these people teaching me all this stuff, and it was kind of fun, but it was a lot of work. Kind of glad it's over with, actually. So coming back to this, here's this fruit of life pattern that's around here. This skull that's up here, that the Egyptians claim that we grew in response to this, to writing. there is physiological evidence to suggest strongly that what they are saying is true. And that is the fact that you can take the entire top half of your head and cut it off and throw it away, and it doesn't kill you. It's called a lobotomy. And this is the electromagnetic, this is the scheme of the basic scheme of the human brain into electronics. And it says right down here that removal of the upper cortical areas, where conscious thinking takes place, has little effect on the circuit of information required for the equally complex computations needed for walking and maintaining equilibrium. I mean, obviously, if you cut off the top half of your head, you're not going to be the same. And you can't run computers and things like that. But you don't die. I mean, which is really remarkable, that it doesn't kill you, that you can take something so seemingly important and get rid of it. And, but according to them, that's because it was an addition to. It was not part of the essential mechanism. Now, coming back to this again, first of all, there was this fruit of life pattern and this stair-step pattern. Here was the fruit of life pattern that she has around there. And so I redrew that pattern as a separate drawing. I was going to begin to analyze what she was doing. So I drew one of the patterns on her. And then I took the ladder pattern and I drew it. And the ladder pattern, which around there, is another way of drawing concentric circles. So I drew this pattern. And then I thought that I would just be able to take these two patterns and superimpose them. That was just sort of the way I was going to, it was just my way of proceeding to try to figure out all the ways that she was looking at this. And when I tried to join the two together, they didn't fit. And I went back and I thought, oh, I must have made a mistake. And I looked at things together and put them back together, and they wouldn't fit. They just wouldn't go together. And you see, because the central pattern in her drawing shows clearly that the central circle is divided into 5 equal places, not counting this line down the middle. There's a very clear 5 division and 7 above and 7 below. So if I took the fruit of life pattern, shows that there's a central, from the central pattern, there's 2 circles above it, reaching up to here. And if this is 5, then this would have to be 5, and this would have to be 5. But when you integrate those 2 patterns together, you'll find that there's a half a circle above and a half a circle below, and it won't work. It just won't work. And I couldn't believe it, and I went back to her original drawing, and then I assumed the ladder was equal, because that's what you do. You assume there's an equal ladder, right? But when I carefully analyzed or measured very, very carefully, I found that the 5 spaces in the middle were one size, and the 7 above and the 7 below, she had contracted them slightly to take up that half space so that the whole thing would fit together. And that was her, like Leonardo had the writing that you had to put a mirror onto, which would show the reflection, that the female was a mirror image. This was her way of saying that our consciousness isn't harmonic. It isn't harmonic. She knew that it wouldn't fit together, and she had to distort the image in order to make it fit. And you were supposed to find that in order to know that. And there is, and I will not say his name, there is an entire book that's been written on this very ladder that had assumed that it was equal, and everything that had been written in that book has to be wrong, because they didn't pick that up. That one little thing was not picked up. So anyway, coming back to these 3 levels of consciousness, what I would like to do now is to look at each one of these levels geometrically. Bring out the geometrical lens or image that each one of these consciousness levels interprets their reality through, and first identify them. Get each one of them identified so we can look at them, and then we will talk about them a little bit deeper. In order to do that, I'm going to give them names, and the name will, and you'll understand why I'm giving them these names as it progresses. The first one, the green one, I'm going to give it an 8 by 10, meaning that the number of radii across the green square is 8, and the number of radii across the circle that forms the phi ratio is 10. So I'm going to call that an 8 by 10. Does everybody get that? Anybody not get it? Okay. The next one will be a 10 by 12 because there's 10 radii across the square and 12 radii across the circle that sort of forms the phi ratio. The blue one is 14 by 18, which is Christ consciousness. Now, the first one, the 8 by 10, there's different ways that you can construct this to get a perfect 8 by 10. And I was just beginning to conceive of a way to do it when Thoth just said, look, let me just tell you a way. He says, it took us a long time to figure this one out. And he showed me this. This is not mine. But it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. You take an X down a circle and you run Vesica Pisces down this circle in this particular pattern. It makes an 8 by 10 perfectly, and you can measure it without it. All you do is where the Vesica Pisces, you run lines down the center where the Vesica Pisces is and where they touch, which will make parallel lines. And then you make parallel lines running this way, like this, running down. When you do, you come up with this. It will be, you can see the grid behind it, and it'll be exactly an 8 by 10. Each one of these things comes down and forms exactly 8 across here, but you know that it's a 10 because you see this Vesica Pisces that extends out here? Half of it is in here and forms one of the squares, and the other half comes out and tells you where the circle is. So you know you've got a perfect 8 by 10, okay, without any measuring sticks or anything. And then you look inside of here. Remember, though I did not get into this in great detail, and there is a book called Sacred Geometry by Robert Lawler, which is a really good book in sacred geometry, and I've got the thing and where you can get this from. And in there he will talk about it, though there are a lot of other sources that will talk about it, that the philosophy of Egypt was reduced to the square root of 2, square root of 3, square root of 5, and the 3, 4, 5 triangle. And all of those sacred angles and the 3, 4, 5 triangle are here at one moment, which anytime you see all that stuff appear at one time, you know you've got something real powerful going on. For example, the diagonal that runs across here is the square root of 2. And what I mean by the square root of 2 is just this. Just so you understand real quickly. If you count this as 1, and count this as a, just say that's a, then we know that a squared equals 1 squared plus 1 squared, right? Or a squared that should be an equals 1 plus 1, which equals 2, or a equals the square root of 2. So this is a square root of 2 diagonal, and the square root of 5 is simply this shape. 2 squares together, which is the Fibonacci one, or the shape of the king's chamber. If this is 1 and this is 1 and this is 1, and you're looking for that diagonal, then this is a, then a equals 1, and this equals 2. 1 plus. So a squared equals, 1 squared is 1, and 2 squared is 4, which equals 5. So a equals the square root of 5. That's the other sacred angle. Square root of 2, square root of 5. And the square root of 3 is the golden mean across that one. That's a little more complex. So they're all here at once. Here's the line coming down there, which is the square root of 2. If you come from this point to this point, if you count 4 of these squares as 1, then there's your 1, and you got 8 going this way, so that's 1 and that's 2, so that's a square root of 5. And then in the middle, around one of the Vesica Pisces, you have a rectangle which produces a square root of 3. It's a little bit more hard to explain. And then you have a 3, 4, 5 triangle inscribed in here. If you count 2 of these squares as your measuring stick of 1, then this will be 1, 2. See this triangle that's inscribed perfectly in here? Well, this edge will be 1, 2, 3, and this edge will be 1, 2, 3, 4. 3, 4, and by Pythagorean rule, that has to be 5. So you have a 3, 4, 5 triangle inscribed perfectly. All the sacred things are here at one place at one time. And all these kinds of synchronicities, if you notice, the circle will precisely hit these precise edges. All this perfect moving lines that go in there. One more thing which is kind of funny here. You see this circle and this eye in here. You see it's the CBS eye. Actually, when we go to the next one, you'll see it even clearer over here. This is the same one again. There's the symbol for CBS, which whoever did that had something going for them when they understood that. And that literally is an eye. It's a lens. It's a lens that the apparitional interprets the reality through. And so here you start seeing all the synchronicities you just saw, and you see how the white light spiral reflects inside of there. The black light spiral reflects perfectly, which we saw later. It'll just precisely tip the edge over there, and all these kinds of things. These amazing motions of lines that happen from this first level of consciousness. Okay, now we got that one. That one of 64 squares, first level has 64 squares in it, is related to another one that we saw earlier of 64 squares, and is related to another drawing we saw of Leonardo's, which is where that other one came from. And so at this point, you can superimpose, though this page was not flat when the copier came on, you can start superimposing all kinds of patterns over Leonardo's drawing all at one time. You've got you've got a lot of stuff going on here now, but all those 64 squares and the first level of consciousness and all these other things are all on there. Notice also that here is the 8-cell division. And you can clearly see now how the proportions of the adult human being are contained in the original 8 cells before it ever even got to the adult. That it's all in there. And you start seeing the black and light spiral motions and a lot of other things. And you can superimpose so many things over there that you can't even begin to see it after a while. And it's all there. These are all just some of the energy fields around the body. And they're so complex, there's so many of them, it just becomes like a light coming off of us after a while. But what this means is that we've always thought that this drawing of Leonardo's is us, right? It's not us. It's the first level. It's where we came from. It's our past. It's our past. It's not the first level. It's not the second level that we're on now. When I saw this and realized this here, my first inclination was, well, did Leonardo understand what I'm being taught through Thoth? Was he was a Mason and all this stuff. I mean, did he? Is that how he got this? These were the thoughts that were going through my mind, and so I started looking through all of Leonardo's works. I went very deeply through everything that I could find on Leonardo, and to looking for another. See, if this was an 8 by 10, what I was looking for was a 10 by 12 or a 14 by 18 to see if Leonardo had another one of the pieces, because this could just be a coincidence. Could be just a coincidence. But if I did find a 10 by 12 or a 14 by 18, then that would be kind of start going outside of the coincidence, because you can make any kind of grid in there to make a human canon in all kinds of ratios. And so I looked and looked and looked, and I never could find it. And then one day, it struck me, well, this wasn't Leonardo's drawing in the first place. It came from his teacher, Vitruvius. And then I thought, well, once I realized that Vitruvius was his teacher, but his teacher lived 200 years earlier. His teacher was dead. And so I then went back and started studying Vitruvius's work. Vitruvius was his primary instructor on this kind of work. In fact, this drawing, right in the books, it says right down here that these are the human proportions after Vitruvius. And so I studied all Vitruvius's stuff to see what was going on there, and I started going through all of his stuff, and bingo, here's this drawing. At first I didn't see it. It was a human canon, and second, and I'll show it to you, and then all of a sudden it popped out and I saw it. Here's the 10 by 12. 2 of the 3 pieces were found. And I'll show it to you in a moment. And I was, then I highly suspected that the same kind of information was not just something that Thoth was new, but this was something that was a body of information that had been kept on the earth for a long time. I'm going to slowly bring you to that level right now in just a moment. This is another way to lay the Vesica Pisces down an axis, a different way, which will produce the second level of consciousness. Again, you do the same thing, drawing your lines along the Vesica Pisces, using your Vesica Pisces as the underlying grid, and it comes up with this one. And again, you can see, only now, here's your Vesica Pisces overextends, and you can see that half of it's on one side, half of it's on the other, and you can count it. There'll be 10 this way, and 12 running across this way. So it's a 10 by 12, 100 squares. Could be why there's 100 squares in this thing. And the king's chamber, as we're going to see, this just struck me right now. I never realized this until this minute. The king's chamber is one of these guys. And it is made for our level of consciousness. It sits on the floor level. You'll see in a moment that there's another, the very level of stones that it sits in there is another proof, which I'll have to come up with in a minute, that they were referring to our level of consciousness. But the number of stones that the king's chamber is made out of is exactly 100 stones. I never realized that until now, that it corresponded with this. I'll have to record that in there. I guess I just did. I'm not going to tell you what all this other stuff is, except for one thing. I will tell you in a moment. The 4 squares that are around the body, the center of the body, that are a reflection of the original 8 cells, when I tried to put in these, I took the original 4 squares out of here, and I started putting the spirals in there, and it just kind of goes all over. It doesn't work. And Thoth watched me for a while, and he's sitting there with a grin on his face. And I says, "What are you grinning for?" And he says, "Well, you're probably not going to get that this afternoon." And I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Would have probably not figured it out. The ratios change. The original 4 squares around the first level of consciousness, if I was assuming that this was 1. But it's not 1, it's 1 squared. Of course, 1 squared equals 1, so how in the heck do you know the difference? There's no way to visually tell the difference. And so when you come to the next one, in order to make the energies work, you have to take, you don't go to 2, but you go to 2 squared, which is 4. And you must take 4 squares as your base. So that the diagonal of 4 squares, which is across 2 of them rather than 1, becomes your key. And so I did that, and then, so it goes 1, 1, 2, which exactly hits the apex of this point up here, and leaves. And everything, all the synchronicity hits again. And we'll explain what all this is in just a moment. I'll come back to this in just a moment. But anyway, this is the eyeball that we use as a lens to interpret our reality with, and it is the second level. But I'll come back to that in just a moment. And this is Vitruvius's. That's kind of fun to say. Vitruvius's canon of the human body. And at first, it does not look like a 10 by 12 because it's got a whole lot of squares in there. But if you notice, he put these heavy dots on certain ones, and which makes a larger square grid hidden underneath there. And so if you count them, you'll see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. A 100 grid is hidden underneath there. And there's this, looks kind of like a vesica Pisces, but if you actually create it, it is not. The centers won't meet with each other. It's a constructed pattern that is a key that if you then put a compass onto from the center place to that place and spin it around, it will form a circle that will precisely hit the longest finger and forms a 10 by 12 pattern around there. So he had it hidden secretly behind there. And there are a lot of real interesting things about this. He has this diamond pattern here, around there like that. The diamond pattern is also the key. Remember the second level? The way that remember you had the 3 squares, and this middle square, which is where we are, to get to the Christ consciousness, you rotate it to a diamond. And so the first one goes like this, the second one goes like that, and the next one goes like this. It's like, and I heard one whale back there. You'll see some more things here. First level consciousness goes like this. The second one goes like that. And the third one goes like this. And it's like the faces of the cube equilibrium that he felt was so important. And so they even have that hidden behind there, even though it doesn't really correspond with a whole lot in there. And the next thing I want you to just notice is that each one of these squares that contains, that is in there, contains 9 squares. Okay? So just remember that thing about the 9 squares and the diamond, because we're going to come back to both of those details a little later. This is Leonardo's drawing of the flower of life, extended out. And he wrote extensively about the flower of life, not just a little bit. He had all kinds of drawings showing this sacred pattern in here and how all the different patterns that were hidden inside of there, the relationships of triangles inside of there, all this various stuff, the seed of life, everything else. These were all the things that you'd find in the walls at Abydos on this temple over there. It almost looks like the same kind of stuff that they were doing on those walls over there. And if that isn't enough, he had pages of showing all the angles and possibilities that were contained in there and the rotational patterns that were contained in the flower of life. You can see the spinning rotations and patterns that were down here and over here. And he had pages of this stuff going on and on and on because he understood the underlying patterns of the reality itself. It turns anybody into that. I mean, it's so after I saw that, I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but there's no doubt in my mind he was heading down the exact same pathway that we are in this room right now.
Maybe he had a teacher like you.
Huh?
Maybe he had a teacher like you.
Well, he had Vitruvius. He had all of Vitruvius's works and everything, and that's what he was studying. Plus, he was a Mason. It was through the Masons that he got that, and he had all that information there. But I just didn't realize that the Masons had this. But yet when I talked to that guy, just want to say that, when I talked to the guy that came into my room that was a Mason, I was asking him all kinds of questions, and he just kept saying, I don't know. I think that we have lost a whole lot in present day time. I don't think the Masons know a lot of this anymore, though maybe they do. I don't want to discredit them, but I just have a feeling that a lot of this has been lost. I have been searching for the canon of Christ consciousness, which they must have. But as I was searching for it, I suddenly started getting discouraged because I realized that if they did have a canon, these guys built these massive churches to Christ. This was the most holy, sacred work of their life. And if they did have the sacred geometry of Christ consciousness, they're not going to have it laying around somewhere. It's going to be locked up in gold boxes and buried 80 feet into the ground or somewhere, and I'm probably not going to find it very easily. And I've never been able, and I've looked through everything I can, and I've never been able to find it. But this is it, right here. But
I read that somewhere that the rest of his work is in the bag and locked up.
of whose work? She said she read that the rest of the work of Leonardo da Vinci was locked up in the Vatican. That would make sense. Yes.
As I understand it from studying the Masons, I'm not one, you don't get the knowledge till your 33rd degree. Did the guy who walked in your room, was he a 33rd degree?
Well, I don't know. This is true, but I have talked to people that are 33 degree who have seen this and said that this was, they had never received anything on this level.
Because I know Walt Disney was one. I mean, there are people
That makes sense too. He actually did a sacred geometry Donald Duck move.
Yeah.
This is a cube. Quack, quack. There's more than one Donald Duck? She asked which Donald Duck was it? Oh, I don't know.
Donald Duck in mathematical.
Donald Duck in mathemagical land?
Mathemagical land.
Mathemagic land. Okay. Well, anyway, this is it. And you can go straight to it because you can you've got all nine concentric circles and it automatically makes the grids. You don't have to go through that complex before. And the interesting thing is the one that forms this one that makes the grid around the body is not 1 squared but 2 squared but 3 squared, which is 9 squares. And remember on Vitruvius' thing, every one of the squares had 9 squares in there. Again, one of the keys showing how it was the key that linked up to the next one. And so 9 squares is the key to that one. And then so you have to go across 3 squares to get your yardstick of 1 to make everything work. And again, 3, 3, perfectly touching the apex of there and leaving. And this is Christ consciousness here. It's the lens that the next third level interprets the reality through. Now, this next drawing is not completely mine, and I really don't know. I want to give credit for who did this, though I don't know who did it because so many people have tried to take credit for this. Elizabeth Clare Prophet said it was hers, but it couldn't have been hers because James Blair had done it 10 years earlier, and he doesn't claim that it is his. And he says that he got it from a much earlier source. So I don't know where the source came from. I don't know if it goes back to Egypt or somewhere like that. But what you're about to see, if you've never seen this before, most of you have seen this on a video, but if you've never seen this before, this is a rather remarkable piece of work. We're going to take these 3 pieces and that you just saw and superimpose them over this drawing that you're about to see, this new one. But if you would carefully, and I want to make a thing about this, I have not drawn this to in this drawing, I did not draw it to precise proportions, though I know what the precise proportions are, and I have drawn the drawing, and I think I've got them back here. I thought I put them in there. We'll see if I did in a moment. But If not, there is the proportions are ever so slightly different. And what I would like you to do is to just strictly follow where I'm showing you on the screen, so that we can make some sense out of this. And that is, first of all, you see the red grid of the 8-cell division. This guy, right? Everybody see that around here? There's the 8 cells. There's the square that fits around the 8 cells. The dotted line is the inner surface of the zona pellucida, and the solid line will be the outer surface of the zona pellucida, or the place that it goes into phi ratio. And now, of course, at the same time, though I don't have it drawn on here, you've got the human body in here, stretched across here like Leonardo. So you've got both the 8 cells division and the human body. Now, if you take a circle, this blue one that goes around here, it just fits in from the top of the head of the human body to the bottom of the feet of the human body, or around the square that will fit around the original 8 cells, either one. And then you make a circle that will fit perfectly at the phi ratio point up here, this one up here, that will just touch this circle and be originated from that place, which happens to be the 13th chakra above your head. Well, yeah, you are coming up with it. This does come back up with that image that the Masons drew in that first one. And it also began to tell me what these places are that they drew to. And what I now know is that in the human body, it's the navel. That's what that spot is right there that this comes up to. It's exactly to where the belly button is. But what all these things are in here is it has to do, and we'll talk about these later. There's a sphere that will move through here and touch all 4 spheres. It's real important. There's another one inside, if you could get it in there, that would touch all 8 of these. The relationship of those 2 spheres, if you put a square around the little one, and if you drew these to the proper proportion, if you put a square around the one that fits through there, relative to the one that sits inside, makes a holographic image of the whole one, and it forms a phi ratio again. And it's another key to all of this. And that, according to Thoth, was why the Lucifer rebellion happened.
Is the difference?
We'll talk about that in a little bit. So the inner aspect of the whole thing has an outer image of what on the outer aspect of the whole thing. But there's a great cosmic controversy over all this, which I'll bring up later. It's the reason why that Lucifer did what he did, but I have to wait till I get there to explain it. Here I was just going to show you the next thing I was going to come up and show you is the pyramid, and then show you the actual pyramid. This is the angle that they're referring to over here. Now these are the drawings that these next 2 drawings are of incredible importance for some people. Not for most of you guys. But the inner circle that passes through the middle determines, if it's set up here, see the circle here? If you set it up here, it will determine the inner thickness of the zona pellucida. The inner circle that will fit inside the middle, if you run them over, they will exactly make, if this is a 64 grid, it will exactly form the original 4 squares in the middle. And if you run it over, it will tell you where the outer thickness of the zona pellucida is. And again, those 2 circles become very, very important. And this is the one where you got these are the precise proportions now. If you ran a square around that one, it would form a phi ratio like the bigger one. And there is another geometrical problem that one would have to solve if you wanted to know everything about the subject. And that is that taking this structure over here, you can see this Star of David pattern around here, which forms a cube, which is sitting at an angle, right? And we know that is, or at least, I guess I'm just basically telling you, that is the way that the energy field sits around the body. But remember we also had a square going this way, right? So we have a square going this way and a square going tilted. And there has to be a mathematical relationship between those or everything was wrong. Took a long time to figure it out. This is it right here. That white tetrahedron is like this green one right here. And the black one, I think it is, comes down like this here, forming this pattern like that. And this is the square that we see going around the body. And these happen to be where the lines are that were drawn on Leonardo's drawing. He divided the whole thing into 1, 2, 3, 4 parts. The piece that comes over the top and the bottom is the length of your hand and all that other stuff. So you can actually see the tilted square or the star tetrahedral field in relationship to the square at this time. And you can mathematically see how the two link together. It was real important for me to see that because once I saw that there was this square this way and also this way, I had to find the link or my mind would never stop. It would just keep going. Because then I would have this little doubt in my head in there going, about all of this. But once I found all of this, it solved the problems for me. We got 4 minutes for questions.
One thing I wanted to ask you, when you were speaking about the sacred geometry and shapes, and I forget where it was, I had the question, I had it written down here, but my question was...
I'm kind of sorry, I want to apologize in a way that you guys can't hit your questions right when they're saying them, right when I'm doing them, but
it's
got to do it this
to
way.
deal with the architecture. And what came to me, my question was, when we're dealing with the sacred geometry and we're building things in the third dimension based on sacred geometry, that they're forming these shapes of beauty, do they only resonate on the third dimension, or do these shapes actually, because of their proportions, do they exist on other levels also?
Yeah, they do.
They extend out
There is,
this octave?
from another point of view, anything that, we'll talk about this later, anything that exists in third dimension first existed in fourth and higher. But it had to first come through fourth before it got to third.
Even if it's not within ratio of using phi and things of that nature to
Even if it's not, no matter what it is. Everything that was created synthetically, say you made this thing, was first created out of your imagination and brought down through the causal planes and slowly brought down through the various levels until you manifested it. And it had to pass through the fourth dimensional level of existence before, which would not look like this. Because it would
Okay,
look
so
like
then my question is, if it is within sacred geometry and is within proportion, does it stay the same, or does it also still continue to shift on each dimension, or does it stay the same shape?
No, shape from one place to the next is utterly, completely, totally, utterly different. Though there is a mathematical relationship to it, it is not the same.
Well, then,
Experientially, if you were to look at a cube here and to see a cube in the fourth dimension, you wouldn't recognize the two.
okay, so the sequences and things of that nature shift also as we move into another dimension.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so all that you've been teaching us is the mathematical proportions that exist on the third dimension.
Yes, but it all applies on all levels.
Right.
Everything
The
keeps...
Fibonacci and things, those apply.
Everything
on all
apply.
levels? They don't shift?
Things will change, but if there's a change, there'll be a mathematical reason why they changed. There's a logicalness to everything, all the way through. There's no just something that just happens. It all comes out of a sphere. Once you know the sphere, everything else will be generated and come back to it in one way or another. There's no surprises on those kind of levels at all. Eventually the mind, you got to get bigger and bigger heads and skulls and to comprehend all this stuff. But there's no changes. And this thing of objects having to first come into fourth dimension first and then third is real important, because when we start looking about the ancient civilizations and what goes on with the grid patterns that create these civilizations and what happens when these grid patterns are I'll just say it right now. If you have a third dimensional object, even though it was created by maybe one person or a group of people, it is not. It's really just light. It's just a thought pattern. It's a standing waveform, and but it is maintained in the reality not by the person who created it, but by the grid that we all have in common. If the grid is broken down, all the thought patterns go back into energy. All synthetic objects dissolve away. And they return back into elements. And they don't hold their shape or their pattern. And so when a consciousness leaves and it dissolves its grid, I'm talking about the grid that extends around the entire planet, like 50, 60 miles up around the planet, then all synthetic stuff goes with it. It's for this reason that a very intelligent race, if they want to leave something on the planet that is going to last for a long time, that's going to go through these dimensional shifts that we go through, and it's going to stay there, then the only way that they can do it, well, it's not the only way, there is other ways, but it requires concentration and a lot of energy. The only way they can do it easily is to take matter that is of the planet, which will naturally move through the dimensional levels. So, which is not based upon a grid. It's based upon the energies of the planet itself. So if you wanted to build the Great Pyramid, you don't make it out of ABS plastic or stainless steel, because when we went through the first shift, it's gone. So you use very hard materials that are out of the earth itself. It isn't that they're primitive in doing that. They're just smart, that's all. They just know that if they want something to stay with that planet for a long time, you make it out of the natural materials of that planet. You could make it out of synthetic materials, but they would have to set up Merkaba fields or something around them, and then they would have to maintain them and in various ways, which is difficult to do. And so it's easier to just use something natural. Okay, now we're going to look at these internal structure rooms inside the Great Pyramid. The reason we're going to do that is because when Akhenaten gave the Egyptian mystery scroll of Akhenaten, the Law of One, he in those last 5.5 years, the way that he trained the people to go in to become to go into the immortal state or the state of awareness of this had to do with these 3 chambers in the Great Pyramid. This is the King's Chamber up here, the Queen's Chamber, and what's sometimes called as the Well. And those 3 places were the primary places that were used, though there may have been other places in there also. They're still discovering more places in there all the time. They've discovered 3 more rooms in the Great Pyramid just in the last year, or maybe, no, more than that, 2 or 3 years or so. And anyway, I want to describe these 3 rooms and what they are. This is called the King's Chamber and the Queen's Chamber. It has nothing to do with kings and queens. This is called the king. It was the Arabs who called this the King's and Queen Chamber. The Arabs bury their men in flat roofs, and they bury their women in pitched roofs, and so that's why it was called the King and Queen's Chamber. If these had been reversed around, they would reverse the names around. And this was never a burial chamber for a person. That was not its purpose, ever. Okay, that's the side view of the King's Chamber, which looks like this. And again, the King's Chamber is 2 squares, and the diagonal of that ceiling height is exactly 1/2 the diagonal, which means that if you're in that room, by measuring the diagonal half, it folds down and marks a very specific spot in the precise center of the room. There are two places of initiation in this room. One of them is right about here. You come in over here, which is where the sarcophagus sits, and the other one is in the precise center of the room. They're different. There's just to go through the initiation spots, you begin down here at the end of this tunnel, which we haven't talked about yet. You then go to the king's chamber. You first go into that tunnel, you wait a few years. You then go into the king's chamber, and you immediately go to the queen's chamber, which is where you get stabilized. You wait a few years, and then you come back and complete it in the center here. It's the final one. This is where they tell you, yes, you really did do it. And so over the top of here, there are these five little chambers over the top of the king's chamber. Now what present-day Egyptian archaeologists say is that those chambers are there to relieve the weight load or the pressure off of that flat roof so that it won't collapse. That's the official purpose of those chambers. But you could say, well, why don't they have any chambers over this one? Because it's a lot further down and a lot more weight. And they could say, well, it's got a pitched roof on it, and they don't need it as much. Then you could say, well, what about this one way down here? It's got a flat roof on it, and there's no chambers on it. And it's got zillions and billions and trillions of more tons of weight on it. And they'll just go, well, I don't know. There is a very specific reason for these chambers up here, and I'm going to try to explain it. But you can get a real good idea when you look at how they're constructed. There are 9 super heavy stones, one-piece stones in the ceiling. And again, like I said, there's 100 stones if you count every stone in the room. And over the top of those 9 stones, there is this series of stones that look kind of like this, where the bottom of these series of stones is polished like glass, and the top of the stones is bumpy and uneven. And then there is an airspace with another series of stones that comes sort of like this. Now I'm going to put all of these in here first, and then I'll talk about them. How many stones what? Oh, that was 6.
This is a side view?
Yeah. Okay. Each one of these things is polished like glass with air underneath it, and then on top of it is a totally irregular, bumpy surface covered with about 1/4 inch of black foam. Looks like it was sprayed out of a spray can. If you just by looking at this, if you know anything about reflection and absorption, this is reflecting something this way and absorbing something that's coming from above. It's a separator, a divider of 2 different kinds of energies. Okay, now that you can see that, what we're going to do now is superimpose those 3 sets of, what Tho says is if you take those 3 levels of consciousness, the diagrams, superimpose them over the diagram of the earth with a great pyramid on it, you can then begin to understand what all these rooms are and why they're placed in those particular positions and everything else of that nature. Now, this one is the first level of consciousness. For those of you who know, the pyramid is based on thirds. That's the primary division factor that is in there. You'll see why they chose thirds right now. The pyramid is used for the second level of consciousness to go to the third level of consciousness. That's its whole soul, purpose, and function on consciousness level. There's a lot of other, lots and lots of other reasons why it exists. Huh? It's for the initiation process that was designed in there, or tuned in there, was for us to go to Christ consciousness. It was not for the aberrational to come to us, or up there for the first level. So from second level to go to third level. And if you drew the pyramid across the earth right here and up to the top, which I don't have on here, you would see that the steps between the base of the pyramid and the top of the pyramid would be into fifths. Be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not divisible by 3. However, here's the pyramid now. And if you notice, this one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which is divisible by 3. And the Christ consciousness one is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, also divisible by 3, which is the reason why thirds were chosen. Now coming back to this one, look at the black and white spiraling energy that comes out of this area. That's why I chose this square up here before. You have a black light spiral coming like this, and you have a white light spiral that just happens to hit the absolute apex of the pyramid and leave. That comes up out there. And supposing you wanted to connect in with just the white light spiral. These are very powerful energy beams that are coming in out of this mass of energy. That's the reason why the mass is so great, that creates these fields. And you want to connect in just with a white light one, which comes out of there and spirals out and reaches deep, 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 deep into space. He says it goes all the way to the center of the galaxy. I don't know. I guess so. And but you got a certain electrical problem in that right above you, you have the black light spiral originating also. And so you say you want to separate those two things out. This was, the king's chamber was put, here's the center of the pyramid, it was put off center. Where they placed it was right here. They don't know why it was off center. It wasn't on center because they wanted to get in here. They can't come up here to get it, they can't come down here because they cross at this point. So they came to this place right here, but then they had this problem. And that was the reason for all those chambers going in there, was to separate the black from the white, get them to two places, so that when you were sitting in the sarcophagus, you could tune into only this one energy field. Otherwise, you'd have both of them originating there. You would be almost impossible to distinguish one from the other. And it was the male energy lines that they were concerned with, not the curving female one. The curving female one has no distinguishing mark on it. But the male one is countable. 1, 1, 2, 3, set at 90-degree turns. Now, one more thing to notice about this arrangement up here. If this was the pyramid, yes, the room is off-center. It sits like that, kind of. But the sarcophagus sits in a place like this, which is in the exact center of the pyramid. So when you are laying down in the sarcophagus with your head facing toward the center of the back wall, you have this, they tune to you have the white light one, the female one coming in too. They tune to the black one, the male one rather, of the white. And it would come in like this, it would hit the very center and rise up, come right up from underneath, come right through where the head is, so that when you laid down, you could tune your head and get the pineal passing right through the center of your pineal gland. That was the whole purpose of what was going on. Your head is toward the door. Same wall as the door, which is toward the center of the Huh?
Is it north, south, east, west?
I believe that it is toward the north. It's coming up at a 45-degree angle right through your pineal gland. And there's a little bit of proof in this that that's how they used it, because recently they have discovered that when a person goes into theta, that there is a chemical that is excreted from the pituitary gland right in here, which comes out as a sweat, and then it crystallizes into this white powder, crystalline white powder, if you stay in there for very long. And when they first opened the sarcophagus, they noticed all this white powder at one end, and they scooped it all up, and it's put into a little glass vial, and it now sits in the British Museum. And it wasn't until just recently that they discovered that it was the same chemical that's excreted when someone is deeply into theta. And it was a lot of powder. It wasn't just one guy dying and having a good time dying in there. I mean, it was a lot of people over a long period of time. Unless he had a real sweaty gland, I guess. So, what they would do is, after going through 12 years of the left eye of Horus and 12 years of the right eye of Horus, and then you were all ready, they took you and they put you into the sarcophagus, they put the lid on, and they left you in there for approximately 3.5 days. And then you would tune to that field, and you would follow the energy out and returning. If it was a logarithmic spiral that they had taken off on, there's no beginning and no end. They would not know how to come back. But because it was Fibonacci and it has a starting point, they can count the turns. And they were trained to do this. They could count their turns right back and come back at 5, 3, 2, 1, 1, and back in their body. They could locate their body in the spiral. And that was all part of the training. This is according to Thoth. It's so outrageous that how could anybody everybody ever just figured it out? I don't know. But that is what they did. And then once they had that, they got out of there and they were like totally blown away from it all. They were then brought down into the Queen's chamber, from which in the Queen's chamber, it was some kind of stabilizing experience so that they wouldn't lose the experience. A lot of times you can have a very powerful experience in life, and then as you start going through life, it kind of fades away. It gets weaker. They did something to them in the Queen's chamber that would lock it in so they wouldn't lose the experience. And I'm not exactly sure what that was. But there was something that leads into the Queen's chamber, a very little known thing, which might bring us home a little bit. Now the other, that was the middle initiation. There's 3 initiations altogether. The first initiation begins down here. Now there's a room down here with a tunnel that just goes down and ends in nowhere. They don't have any idea why it's there. They don't know. They got a pretty good idea now because we told them. And they've sealed it off with big bars to make sure nobody gets in there anymore. But and they did know that there was. It was really strange because when we first got there, they had barred it off up at the top. They just barred the whole thing off and made it illegal to go in there. I mean, you went in there, right to jail. I mean, they even had a guy with a machine gun sitting there for a long time, make sure that no one messed around with it. And the reason was because so many people that have went down there have died. Lots of them. Or have been maimed, or have been poisoned, or sent into hospitals. And by means that no one can understand, they have found poisonous snakes down in there that don't exist in Egypt, or poisonous spiders that don't exist in Egypt. Poisonous gases have just appeared out of nowhere. on and on and on, stuff like this. And it's all documented. And the government will clearly admit to it, the whole thing. They just don't know what is going on down here, and so they just sealed the whole thing off and won't let you in there. We have clearly shown to them that that's not the problem. The problem is at the end of this tunnel. And so since then, they have opened the doors up, and you can now go down in here, but the tunnel is blocked off and sealed, so you can't get inside of it. It's big, heavy bars. Do you have a quick question?
Yeah. What is the pit?
Who knows? Nobody knows what the pit is. The pit is the mystery of the pyramid for me. The pit is a room. It's a big pit. But that's where they put the workers. No, but on the edge of this pit is what looks like a golden mean, big, huge block, polished, clean, smooth, of granite. I think it's granite. And it looks like it's ready. It looks like you can just push it over and it would fall. And I've sat and thought about this a long time, and I'm sure it's meant to fall at the right moment. It will, and probably will shake the whole earth somehow. I don't know what it's meant to do. But that block is ready to go, and it isn't going.
It looks like a room.
Well, that isn't the exact shape of it. I just... a womb? Don't let that lady see any ink blots, bitch. Okay. Anyway, I don't know what the pit is. I really don't know. I'm sorry, but I don't know what it is. But it is something very special. Well, okay, I'm going to tell a story about it. And it is a fourth dimensional tunnel. This is why all these things would appear in here. You go into the fourth dimension. The end of it extends into the fourth dimension. And when you go in there, whatever you think and whatever you feel literally happens. And so if you're uninitiated and you go in there and you have any fears, they become real. If you're afraid of something, then that thing becomes real and it'll kill you. If it's your fear, if your fear is of drowning, the whole place would fill up with water. You can't have any fears and go into the fourth dimension, or they will become real. And we're going to talk about that a lot too. Okay.
Did you just say this was the first level of initiation?
This is the first level of
How
initiation.
did you know all your fears manifested before you went?
You have to work with those first. The first 12 years of training, which we're going to show you in a little bit, was the left eye of Horus, and that's where you dealt with all your fears. Once you got through all your fears, I mean, you got to be with a place where you could be so fearless that if they said anything, you'd be able to do it without even a heartbeat, and could not be afraid of dying at all in any way, shape, or form, or any of the other fears that are associated with humankind. You could be fearless. It's the only way you can get through. And all the world's religions dealt with this. Like some of them were incredible, the things they would do to get you to get into a fearless state. And then the 12 years after that was the training on the mental planes and the stuff, like kind of things that we're going through to get the understanding. And then once you had the emotional and mental balance and all of this stuff, then they would have you begin in this little chamber down here. Let me show you why the wall, this tunnel, just goes out in the middle of nowhere. Look what happens with the black light spiral. It comes right down here. So what they did is, they had, the room was right here, and they dug the tunnel over to where the black light spiral arm was reached. And they did it down here and not up here because this goes through 0 point. And they didn't want to get it up in here because whoever got it up in here would have to go through the great void. And they wanted to catch it after it was outside of the great void, after they got outside of 0 point, And so it begins with the experience that takes you into the darkness rather than into the light, or the halls of mente. That's what it's called. It's literally an infinite space. And so, the same way, there's this long tunnel. There's this tunnel, and you've got this, I believe it actually comes from this direction now I think about it. Like this. And the person would sit in, originally they would sit with their knees folded up like this, but the tunnel's only about that high. And we can't do that. So what I had to do was to lay down with my body like this. And then you line that beam up to your head, and you can feel it. It feels like somebody's got a... It's real strong. I mean, you can't miss it. There's no way you could possibly miss this one. And you've got 2.5 million blocks of mass forming this thing. And then we all had to lay down. There was 5 of us. Like this, but the hieroglyphics, when you see the hieroglyphics around this, you'll see them like this, sitting like this. And this will be Osiris. And there'll be like 40 or 50 of these guys inside this tunnel. This tunnel like 75 feet or 100 feet long. And so Osiris will be sitting here, facing that way, and then all these other people will be facing this way. And he's taking them into the halls of mente.